How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Ganji. Welcome to another episode of Tier Talk. Guys, we're going to be discussing mental health. We're going to be discussing dealing with mentally ill inmates, as well as if you're custody or if you're corrections, working in the system, whether you work in a jail or a prison. We're also going to talk about our own mental health. This discussion is pretty much going to be about our mental health and also dealing with inmates at this point who have mental health concerns. To be honest with you guys, prisons and jails have become a bit of a home for a lot of inmates that have mental health concerns. We're picking up on what a lot of these other state facilities can't do. So this is definitely a needed dialogue. It's where it's trending. So are we training our officers enough? I mean, what should we train them in? I mean, that's a great question to ask. But in the process, are we taking care of ourselves? Do we make sure that we don't lose our own sanity in the process? And today I'm going to have on Denise Schonwald. She is a nationally licensed medical health counselor, and she also just has familiarity with our field. She works in the field. She's a friend of a friend of a good friend of mine, Major Sean Klosnick. If you guys aren't familiar with him, he's been on my show once before, and he recommended her to the show. And just after talking to her briefly, I'm honored to have her. She literally, guys, she has credentials that, I wish I would have, but this is the effort of hard work, So again, bravo. I'm glad she's able to take the time and come on the show today. Real quick, guys, want to go over my sponsors. So we have American Military University. If you got, that's a small one. What happened there? Hold on a second. There it is. Bam. We have American Military University. Guys, if you're looking to get a degree, seek higher education, please check out American Military University, guys. They're very supportive of what we do, very supportive of not just the corrections profession, but also what we do here on Tier Talk. So please, guys, if you get a chance, want to get that degree, bring some experience into the classroom, please check out American Military University. I also have Inmate Manipulation Decoded. That's a great book in the market. It's used all across the country right now for training. So if you guys looking to train something on inmate manipulation, please check out Inmate Manipulation Decoded. The link to that is in the description. It seems like we have over 20 people already in there. It's pretty awesome. Thank you, guys. I'll give some shout outs real quick. And we also have My Journey, Lessons Learned While Working in a Prison, My Journey from Officer to Administration. This is another good book. Guys, that book right there, it's just got a bunch of tips and passages from just many people in the profession. I have a passage and it's supported by a tip from someone else in the profession. It's a great book, and it pretty much covers a whole just the whole gamut, I think, of any area of corrections that you're looking to cross into. It's just literally my experiences and the experience of others. So again, let me just give my shout outs real quick because we got comments coming in. What's up, Alicia? Hello, Alicia. Hello, Jojo. Hey, 616 Love. Always a pleasure. Thankful for a lifetime to Anthony and Connie. Yeah, 616 Love. I am so proud of her. I mean, one day when we have to have a story about a warrior, 616 Love truly is that warrior. Trust and believe that. And then we also have Joe. Usually he's on the show with me, so I hope he's not jealous and I hope he's not hating. Alicia, who's my road dog. It's been my road dog for a bit now, so good to see you here, Alicia. Gloria, good to see you. Eric S., we go way back. Me and Eric S. have been to a few conferences together. It's always good to see him on the channel. And as I said, we got Scott Inquirer, and we also have, where is the other person? See, sometimes, guys, when you're on LinkedIn, sad thing is, guys, when you're on LinkedIn, I can't identify who the user is. But let me bring in our guests. Hold on one second, guys. Everybody, if you don't mind, can you please welcome Denise Schonwald. What's up, Denise?
Hi, nice to meet you.
Oh, pleasure is mine, Denise. Hey, Denise, do you mind introducing yourself to our audience and take your time in your introduction? I know you got a lot of things going on there, but my audience would love to know your background a little bit.
Well, I'm a licensed mental health counselor. I'm licensed not only in the state of Florida where I live, but also nationally. So I can see clients in any state, which makes it really nice with Zoom. And many people now really like to have counseling in their living room or in their office where they don't have to travel. Before I was a therapist, I was a critical care nurse. I'm still licensed as a nurse. I've been a nurse over 30 years. And so I like to bring sort of the medical and the emotional and the spiritual into healing, which many of us need.
And can I ask you a question? What brought you into this line of work?
Well, as a critical care nurse, certainly as with correctional officers, you see people in crisis. And when people are very, very sick, a lot of times the family dynamics will just sort of fall apart right at the bedside. It's a very stressful time, and families often will bring in old issues, and conflict just happens. And over the years, I got pretty good at working with different families, and I really found it a passion to help people through tough times, and I enjoyed it so much. As I got older, critical care nursing became a grind for me. Doing call and getting up in the middle of the night was really getting too much for me. But I didn't really want to stop practicing. I enjoyed that. And so I decided to go back to graduate school and become a therapist. And I'm so glad I did. I enjoy it a lot.
Well, the profession is thankful that you made that choice as well, by the way. Now, obviously, I do want to cross into our own mental health, but and I am going to be taking questions from the audience. I just want to make sure we keep things on topic, and the audience is very good with this. So we're going to be talking about, first, I would like to talk about dealing with mentally ill inmates. So with that said, a lot of people may not really know this, but prisons and jails have pretty much become a center for dealing with inmates with mental health concerns. And it really starts at the jail, because a lot of times the jails recognize it. An inmate may come in with never being diagnosed, never seeing mental health, and then all of a sudden the professionals at the jail are able to actually put that inmate onto a right track, if you will. But can we maybe start off a little bit with the crossover into jails and prisons? What made you interested in looking towards the jails and prisons and see where you could be of assistance there?
Well, I really started to get involved with the jails, looking more with helping the correctional officers. I find that with any type of really stressful job, certainly I had it in critical care, any sort of medicine, police, law enforcement, correctional officers, we're sort of in crisis, and we have to constantly be in what we call our sympathetic nervous system, which means we're constantly on alert. And what can happen with that is when we get home, it's sometimes tough to transition. So we tend to get home and have a lot of anxiety, comes out in anger issues. These are where a lot of addictions and attachments start to form, where we start overeating, drinking, smoking, and so forth. And these are just ways that the body's trying to deal with stress and get some balance. And I just felt like correctional officers seem to really have probably one of the highest stress rates, because when they're in working, they really have to be on high alert. They're like, even critical care, sometimes we had a stable patient and I didn't have to be as on guard as I had to be if I worked at a prison or a jail, where you really are under a lot of stress 24/7.
Yeah, and I know we had a discussion right before the show started. I feel that there's a lot of agencies that are stepping up and providing training for all correction staff, but really definitely for the custody side, because obviously they have interaction with these inmates all day long in partnership with the mental health providers, especially if they're in like some type of treatment unit within the facility. And we also have inpatient and outpatient inside the prison settings. Could you explain that?
Well,
the inpatient, outpatient?
Well, one of the things that I think may be helpful when we go into when someone is put into the system is probably maybe for the first time they're actually getting some mental health care. A doctor seeing them, maybe if they need medication that's prescribed, and then while they're inpatient or whatever, or in a facility, they are at least being treated regularly, getting their medications, and so forth. Outpatient, I don't know exactly how much control they have with that. I imagine they're managed somehow, but that can be very helpful. Probably the key that we need to think about with people that are in the jail or in prison are personality disorders, such as sociopathy or psychopath. And that's when people are brought in that really don't have the ability to have compassion or empathy. And that they can be extremely dangerous. And these are these are people that you really don't want to let get behind you because they can't be trusted. And not only can they not be trusted, but they can really harm someone very quickly and not feel any sort of remorse. So that can be a little bit challenging with the personality disorders such as sociopathy.
Yeah, there's some good questions coming in. So we'll definitely create the dialogue as we go, but I was wondering if I could just pop a few in real quick. So Eric S. asked a good question. He said, Anthony, can you ask your guest to explain how vicarious trauma impacts correction professionals? And I know that's something we're going to be talking about later on, but if it's okay, would you mind maybe just kind of getting into that a little bit?
Absolutely. And sometimes we experience things in situations that really have nothing to do with us, but sort of bring up old trauma that we may have experienced. And I think a lot of times we don't really take the time sometimes to recognize that. We feel it and then we stuff it right back in and we go, oh, I don't want to deal with this right now. We saw it a lot. If I can give you a different example other than being in the correctional arena, we saw it a lot with COVID. COVID was a time where sort of the world sort of stopped and we all had to stay home. And as far as mental health, a lot of old trauma, either from someone else or something that we've experienced, started bubbling up, and things that people hadn't dealt with for years all of a sudden became a concern. Got a lot of calls during COVID for people that were just really in crisis, which was really sad, actually.
Yeah, and I'm going to tell you something. If I may add to Eric's answer, if I may compliment what you said, I know myself very well, and I do listen to the people that know me outside of uniform, if that makes sense.
Yes.
So I'm very open if they tell me there's a shift in my character or a shift in my personality, or if I'm changing just however subtle. And I make sure I hold on to that, and I make sure I'm like, okay, make sure I listen to them, obviously. And I kind of go back and maybe there's something I have to discuss with them. And I know a lot of people are like, well, you really can't bring work home. And I get when they talk about maybe there's certain things like, I don't know, if it's a bad day, you don't want to bring that anger home, but it doesn't mean you can't vent. It doesn't mean you can't talk to your loved ones, because they know who you are outside of uniform. And I always tell people that when you vent to your officers, let's say, they're going to help you try to prepare for your next day of work. My wife or my family is going to help me to prepare me to go back to me. So how important is it to kind of know who you are? Yes, but also listen to the people who are outside of uniform, who know who you are before you put that uniform on.
Actually, you bring up an excellent point. I'm glad that you did that, because what happens when the body is not in balance or when it's not in a good place? We know that by how we act. Maybe we go to the refrigerator too many times for food. Maybe the mind starts to become really overactive and we get really anxious. And sometimes we don't realize that we're doing it, but people in our lives realize that. And so it's the perception that other people are getting when they're around us. And it's really good to have someone that we love, or someone that's in our life, to sort of call us out and go, I don't know if you realize it, but you're really you're a little irritable today, or are you overwhelmed? You seem like you're not yourself. And it's really a good check-in with what you all do and with what I do. All day long, we're dealing with stress and problems and so forth. And at some point we get a little, I wouldn't say immune to it, but we start to understand that that's part of our job, but that doesn't mean that doesn't affect us. And you bring up a really good point where people in your life sort of go, hey, you're not quite acting yourself. And that's a good cue that we need to do something more for balance.
Yeah. And as I said, for people that misinterpret, work from home and home from work, that whole cliche, be careful with that. Like, I understand you may not want to definitely bring home into work. I get that. I get that 100%, but because of the stresses of the job, for people to think that the other applies, and you better not bring work home. But there's a piece of you that your family knows. And I think they know how to talk to you, so you can keep moving forward. And also, I also tell people to know who you are coming in and have a destination of where you want to go. You can't just be doing this for the money or whatever that external incentive is. You have to have purpose. You have to have reason to keep it going. And I also, the other thing is in corrections, I I always tell people you have the stress of the moment, the trauma after, and then the anxiety of what's yet to come. And it's a circular pattern, you know, because when you're done with one moment, there could be another moment that happens. What would be the advice for people that get caught up in that circular routine without taking a breather?
One of the things that is really important that I seem to have to stress a lot with people is balance. We stay busy, we work, we have bills, we drive. I mean, we're always sort of on the go. And then unfortunately in our day to day, when we relax, a lot of times we get on our devices. We're checking Instagram, we're texting and so forth. And even though we feel like we're relaxing by doing that, or that's our downtime, it's really not downtime for the mind, because the mind is still processing and reading and so forth. It is very important for everybody, not just if you're in the correctional arena, to have some time in what we call parasympathetic, where we're just being, whether it's gardening, whether it's a hobby, fishing. Certainly we all have our idea of what we like to do for that. But it's really important that the body and the mind gets some time to just be, and just to sort of find some fulfillment. It could be in nature. There's just a lot of ways, but it really is the key, because if we don't do something healthy, the body will just naturally go to something not healthy. And these are where sort of addictions start to creep in.
And I do want to cross into some of the officer questions as we go. I just want to get some of the inmates as well. 616 asks a good question. Now, this is a personal question.
Okay.
616 has been following our channel for quite some time. As she mentioned in the chat, she's going through a concern right now where her boyfriend or husband or fiance was doing well, was doing great, and then just relapsed after 15 years. And then I believe may have found himself going back into the system again. So one of her questions is, my fiance is diagnosed with schizoaffective as well as bipolar. Can she please tell me how I need to advocate for him while he is incarcerated?
And that can be really tough, because both of those diagnoses, even by themselves, can be really challenging to deal with. I imagine there's someone, either a physician in the system or nurse practitioner. And so the questions are, what medications are being used, or what are you prescribing? And what is that going to look like? Like, what do we have to do when he's out of the facility so that he can maintain some sort of, normalcy or some balance? But what I see mostly with the schizoaffective and the bipolar is both of those diagnoses, they have difficulty staying in compliance with taking their medications, which is key.
Well, let me ask a question about this. A good question. So I want people to know something right now, guys. We don't just send inmates that have mental health concerns out to a world not ready to receive them. We do everything we can to connect them to something. Even if the inmate's maxing out, we will try to transition them into a home. If there is special needs and homeless, let's say, we're not going to leave them on the streets. Or if there's a family, usually there's some connection with the family before they leave to try to make sure that we can facilitate those needs, because we don't want that inmate to stop well, now they're released, but bear with me, guys. I work in a prison. I may use that term a little bit. I don't mean anything condescending by it. But we want them to have a plan. We don't want them to forget, because sometimes, guys, when the inmate's locked up, we can enforce the taking of that medication. Once they're out, it really is on them, unless you're going to sit with them 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, which, who can do that, guys? I mean, that's hard. But let me ask a question. When you have inmates that are getting ready to be released that do have some mental health concerns, especially those that are maybe on some forced psychotropic meds, so the ones that you really have to monitor, what does the system do right now to keep that, or try to keep that progress going? And also, one other question. When an inmate, or let's say 616 Love, to complement her question a little bit, let's say he was already diagnosed with this going in. Can the mental health team at the jail, because I guess he went back to the jail, can they work with the doctors on the streets, the person that has been seeing him prior to him being incarcerated? Is there a partnership there at all, or what happens there?
That would be, since I don't really work inside the jail, I don't know, but I would imagine, I know even from my standpoint, it's very beneficial sometimes to work with their physician or on the outside to get some sort of continuity or coordination of care. as I said before, my dad had bipolar disorder, and he was an airline pilot. He did really well when he took his medication. And what happens is people start feeling better and they go, oh, I don't need it. And as a family member or a fiance and so forth, you can encourage them, but you can't really make people do something. And so, there has to be some accountability where someone says, listen, I need these medications and I need to be responsible for taking them.
Yeah, and Denise, by the way, you're awesome. The audience is loving you. There's so many questions here. So if you don't mind, and by the way, anything that you want to discuss, feel free. It's your show. Discuss it. But I got a lot of questions, and I was hoping maybe just to toss you some questions because they're loving you, Denise. They're loving you. So I'm just going to go down the list, guys, and I'm going to try to get to all the questions here. I didn't expect so many questions to pile up so quick. So Joe Paponio, okay, ma'am.
I was just going to say, I find that people really like to listen about mental health. It's something that even if you're coming and you really don't want to, not interested, that, we all can connect on this level. So,
and to be honest with you, sometimes our audience may not be so used to talking to someone as dedicated as yourself. You're not doing this because it's a job. You're doing it because you love it and you're passionate about it.
Absolutely.
So I think that's what motivates not even just questions to be answered, but personal questions like 616 love, because she knew that, well, there's passion behind this woman. So I'm going to be a little vulnerable and ask her a question because I trust in her. And I know that she'll give me a good, honest answer. So Joe mentions, now we know Joe, we all love Joe. Joe usually is a guest on my show or kind of co-hosts with me along with Russ Hamilton. So this is, I think, from the inmate side of things. When people come to jail, they're usually at the height of their mental disease. How do you take someone in that condition and help them plateau prior to being placed in a prison environment?
And that can be tough. It's very similar that when we were in critical care and somebody came in and they were extremely unstable, you try your best to try to get some stability. What you may worry about or might be the sort of the top of the concerns is their own safety and your safety, because they can sometimes be very violent if they're hallucinating and so forth. So it's really important to get a mental health professional in to see what we need to do to stabilize this person so that they don't get harmed and we don't get harmed.
Right now, 616 Love, so she's the one that had the fiance. So she said, she goes, yes, I had to personally give him his medication or he wouldn't take it. She's 100% on point. Yes, he was previously already diagnosed and they weren't interested in his psych information. Said he will be going back to prison. So thank you so much, brother. I'll reach out personally as I have other questions too. And I believe you also gave out your email, right? The email, if she has any questions, you have an email that you also gave, correct?
Yes, I did. And while we're on that topic, I've written a book. It's called Healing Your Body by Mastering Your Mind. So if you go to my email or
let's see that book again. Can I see that book again? I apologize.
Absolutely.
Okay, I didn't know you had a book. I'm going to buy that book. I'm going to buy that book.
Well, actually, if you email me or go to my website and contact me, and whoever wants to provide an address, I will mail them a book as just coming on the show and so forth as my gift.
You are just a wonderful woman. Just thank you. And the only thing is, when I get a book, I want it autographed.
Absolutely.
I want it autographed. But can I just see that book one more time, please?
Yes,
I just want to get the name.
I wanted to show you something else. Okay, so here's the book. You can see it on Amazon if you just really want to get a better. Whoop, I have it straight enough. There we go.
All right. Is that available on Kindle too?
Yes.
All right.
I only have regular copies in my little store here, but I'd be happy to send them out. And in each one, right around the table of contents, I put a little like positive, some sort of like a positive affirmation or something. So you could look forward to that too.
Well, you got a nice little compliment. Not only are you smart, but you're beautiful as well. Everybody's loving you. Oh my God, buying the book. I know 616 Alicia is going to jump on that. Probably Julie. They're very supportive of what we do on the channel, but very supportive of the guests that come on. And me and Alicia sometimes have dialogues on the most recent books we've read because we kind of read the same material. Yeah. I got some more questions here. There's a lot here. So I was thinking about maybe one day what we could do is do a show just to put up there, but I want to give this to the guests right now because they're very active and I want to kind of give them the show.
And I'm happy to come back, by the way.
Oh, you're coming back. You're coming back. You just signed that in blood. You're coming back. if de-escalation and confrontational avoidance is a correctional officer's daily goal, what are some areas that you could recommend for future studies to help or assist with dealing with mental health?
Honestly, probably one of the best ways of dealing with somebody, particularly who's violent or anger, is to really maintain your own composure. That's probably not news to anybody in the correctional, again, facility or arena. But what I found as probably my most effective tool for being a good counselor is to really do a lot of my own work. I work a lot on balance. I exercise. I do a lot of meditation, just because it's not very helpful if I come in to help somebody in crisis and I'm not in a good place. And when you're trying to de-escalate someone and you're very, very anxious and uptight, they can sense that, and it can make all that get a lot worse, particularly if they're angry and then you get sort of tough with them, then you're going to probably get a nice explosion.
Yeah, I know advice I always got was you can't control another individual unless you have control of yourself.
Absolutely. And and it's so true. And when someone is already heated, the only thing that you really should do is try to stay neutral. Try to what I try to do is validate. It's like, okay, I understand you're frustrated, or I know you're disappointed, or it sounds like you're really overwhelmed. And I try to just validate what I'm hearing, so at least they can somewhat get that I understand what they're trying to communicate. And I think that's what a lot of people want when they scream or they're upset. They want somebody to hear them.
Now, can I ask you, I have a great question coming up from Viviana. But before I ask her question, and guys, I am going back through the chat, so hopefully I don't miss any. But let me ask you a question. As a correctional officer, if you're dealing with an inmate that's in mental crisis, whatever it is, and you're trying to get them from point A to point B, whatever that may be, whether it's going to be if they need to go put on a constant watch or brought to the infirmary, whatever it is, and let's say they're in a state of delusion. Do we feed into the delusion, or what do we do? I mean, I know some people like, oh, well, you can't tell them that doesn't exist, because then it's like complete shock and they wind up becoming resistant. Is there a balance when interacting with someone who's going
and
through that?
Also you want to establish a little bit of trust, that you're not, because if they're delusional, they're already afraid and they're worried about something happening, or they see something. So you can say, listen, validate that. I understand that this is what you're seeing, or this is what you're feeling. Why don't we go over to the doctor or to the nurse practitioner and see if we can sort of figure this out? So again, they call that holding space. And I use this technique a lot when I'm working with I also work with terminally ill people or very chronically ill. And there's not a whole lot that I can do for them other than support them. But I do try to sit in that space and understand that this is how they feel, regardless if it makes sense to me or not, particularly when they no longer want to continue with chemotherapy or something like that.
Now, Viviana asks a good question here. She says, how do we encourage our inmates who are mentally ill to keep taking their medicine? What are some tactics to convince them? Real quick, if I may, I like what she's asking, because it says, what can we do to encourage, not force them? Because there's some states that will force. So this is more of the softer side. So how do we encourage our inmates who are mentally ill to keep taking their medicine?
And I do, well, with what I do also, I can't make someone change. I mean, certainly they come to me and they have a problem, and it's usually very clear to me what I could help them with. But it's very important too that I understand that, they have the right to choose. So as far as medication, I would say, listen, this medication was prescribed because for whatever reason, and it's very important that you stay consistent with it. We will help you on our end. We'll do everything that we can to support you, but you also have to take responsibility to do your part. Other than that, there's not a whole lot you can do. You can't make someone do something. And you can even say something, listen, I would hate for you to come back and be as unhappy or as ill as you were when you first came in. So hopefully we can work together and you can stay consistent with your medication.
Yeah, and I'm going to tell you something, guys. I've dealt with inmates that are going through mental health crisis. At that point, I mean, we could, if need be, but remember, we are dealing with an inmate that's going through a mental health crisis. We could use physical force to get them from point A to point B. But again, this is not an effort to hurt the individual. It's actually an effort to protect them. So, and it's good to also have officers that have good rapport with these inmates, because they're able to separate the difference between, I know this inmate's acting out, but be advised, this inmate also suffers from these concerns. Sometimes, on a little side note, when we have inmates that aren't eating correctly and they're diabetic, when their sugar goes high, they can become very, very aggressive. And some facilities will put it on the cell door that this inmate is diabetic. So now when custody sees that, they have to be wary that there's no excuse. You got to do this right, because it just said on the door that this inmate is diabetic. So you can't just walk in there assuming that this guy wants to fight and cell extract them. You're not doing that. I've literally, it's like, I know this may sound crazy, but I literally had to go into a cell with an inmate that was aggressive on the higher end of a diabetic concern. And I literally had to like Denise said, slow down, introduce myself, build some level of trust, see if the inmate knew where they were. And then just, eventually we had to get in and hold the person down and give them the shot. And it's amazing how quick that whole demeanor they just change and they calm down. But it's a moment where you're using force, but the force is to really protect that individual. Okay.
I was just saying, and we both know that either when we're physically ill or we're emotionally ill, we're not in a good place. So even when I used to work in the hospital and people came in and they were physically very ill, they could be very demanding, very abrupt, and so forth. And I had to understand, as difficult as that was to deal with, they were in crisis. So whether it's physical or emotional, it's still very, very important to them that they understand that we are there to help them. And I feel like that's important to let them know.
I love that. And I want us to remember that as well as staff, but also I think the public needs to hear that, what you just said, to be honest with you. I think that's the one thing that the public doesn't understand, that we are there to help them. I have another question. This is a good question. I don't know if you're able to answer this, but it comes from Savlatnia Bidek. And she says, Denise, I work in a mental health and social work in Canada. Are there any courses I need to take that are required in U.S.? Now, you're nationally licensed. Is there anything that you think that you would have to take that's mandated in the U.S.?
Yes. What happened when, so I graduated from a school in Florida and I sat down and took boards, but then I realized that I would only be licensed to practice in Florida. And then I got thinking, like, what will I do if I ever move? And then they said, oh, you'd have to take a national set of boards. So I ended up sitting for 2 sets of boards, which one of the things that practicing in the United States is, it's pretty lengthy process. You have to really sort of go through the hoops. I don't know. We have to keep up with CEUs, continuing education units, which I imagine you have to do in Canada too. But it's a lot. And since I'm licensed in nursing, licensed in the state of Florida, and licensed nationally, I feel like I'm always taking a quiz. So it can be pretty brutal. If you'd like to email me, I'd be happy to help any way I can with that.
Oh, you know what? We could do it at the end of the show, guys. If you stay at the end of the show, we'll give out her email. I got tons of questions here. So I told everybody put hashtag questions. So I know, but I want to go back a little, because there's a couple of questions. Eric's got some real good questions, but then there was another question that came in from the end. Let me do this question first, and then I want to find Eric's questions. He got some really good questions coming in, but Hasman also had a good question. I think that me and you could partner up on this. How do you convince other officers you work with to be more compassionate towards the mentally ill inmates, but at the same time maintain professionalism? So if I may go first, if that's okay.
Sure.
I think a big thing for me, from management down, is training to some level of understanding. I think that our staff needs to understand who it is that they're dealing with. And be honest with you, when you have good officers that build a rapport with some of these inmates, they'll be the first ones to step up and say, yo, just be mindful, this inmate, they'll sort of advocate. This inmate, I've talked to mental health. This inmate may have these concerns. And at this point, when we go in there, be wary, he's not himself. So I think just some more training, some level of understanding, and if you are the training officers or you're an older officer, you got your time in, model the right behavior model it, because we could do whatever we could in training, but if we bring staff into a culture that's ultra aggressive, it doesn't matter what we're training, because they're going to get swept up in the culture. But what's your thoughts? I say training, understanding. I think that's where it hits home first.
And I loved what you said about modeling, because you can't expect people to do something that you're not doing. And that's one of the reasons why I really work a lot on my own mental health, because I feel like I'd be a hypocrite to say, you should work on this, you should work on that, and then I don't do that. But as far as when you see someone or a coworker that's not really compassionate, it might be worthwhile, and I don't know how this would work if you're their supervisor, that you sit them down and go, listen, how did you feel it went when you were, doing this in this situation? And then you could say, listen, I thought you did a really good job of, sort of addressing the situation. It may have been helpful if you could have gotten some understanding so that you weren't quite so aggressive or abrupt with them. That may have been something that you may want to consider. You got to go in like really neutral. And I usually try to find something that I think that they did fairly well, and then also some suggestions that they may want to consider.
Yeah, it's great that you say that, because so for me, I want to add on that, because there's something that you got me thinking about. The timing of it all is important too. Like, you don't want to do it in front of everybody, and you want to do it with the person that has the best rapport with that individual, because, if I don't like you, you can have the best advice in the world, I'm not going to listen to it. So sometimes we may have to step back and say, we may not be the best person to give that advice. Let me go ahead and talk to Joe, because I know Joe and him fish a lot. So maybe Joe and him could talk about, what we need to, and I also want to add another thing I think that matters for custody. Don't be afraid of the word compassionate. Don't define it to this extreme, because I know sometimes custody sits on these extremes. And then there are people that have softer skills that are now actually, guys, be honest, where the corrections is going, the softer skills are probably what we need right now. We want to de-escalate. We don't want issues to take to this level, but don't get me wrong, we still need the people to be there, but that really is our last resort. So for people to embrace the softer side of things, starting with, don't be afraid of words of empathy and having some level of compassion, because in the end, guys, when you have to defend yourself, these are the words, or however you were with all these things matter, because you're going to be judged on your interactions with that inmate population.
Yes.
Eric's just got a bunch of good questions here. Yeah, he's good. We catch a lot of conferences together. Possible question for later, but is there a link between the kinds of people who are drawn to the corrections profession and the mental health issues they experience during their careers?
I'm not sure I understand the question. Kinds of people who are drawn to the connection that I have to the correctional professionals was just to come in and give in services about the importance for the correctional officers to do their own mental health. So I never really got in. I tried to do one of my internships inside the prison, but there was so much paperwork, and I just couldn't get in. I ended up doing a year specializing in substance abuse. It was an inpatient facility for teenagers. So I still got a lot of sort of substance abuse training, but I had really wanted to go into the correctional facility and do some counseling, but it never really worked out.
Well, I could say something on that. Like, so I think when it comes to working in a prison or jail, you have to be defined by some passion, because in the end, the stuff that you're going to see, the stuff that you're going to go through really can't be justified by, I'm doing it for the pay or the benefit. Right. It's not enough, especially when you could get an easier dollar somewhere else. So I do believe there should be something that connects you on that deeper level to this profession, that keeps you motivated through these rough times. I always try to say, however general, the service to others, because I believe no matter whatever level you're at, you are in a position to create an impact on another life, whether it's an inmate or whether whether it's a coworker, a supervisor, you always lead up. We're all human at the end of the day. But I think part of it also is that what we experience day by day, I mean, I do believe it could have an effect on us.
Oh, absolutely.
If we are passive and allow it to happen. I know some people, so my friend William Young does a show, and he hates it when people say you shouldn't let the profession get to you. And it's very general. And I say, well, here's what I think people mean by that. If you go into corrections without an intentional plan, and you're just passive and you just kind of let the profession hit you every way you can, then yes, you're not going to make it out. I'm sorry, guys. survival in this profession, both physically and mentally. But I know physically we're always intentional with that. Mentally, we may just not be so intentional. And I think when it comes to our mental health and well-being in regards to this profession, we have to be intentional every day with making sure we're correct with ourselves. Would you agree with that, Denise?
Absolutely. But even if we're really good at it, like not taking it all on and so forth, we still are human beings. Like, for example, I do a lot of my own work, but like, I'm not a robot. I mean, I do have feelings, and sometimes after a long week, I'm just really heavy and tired just because I've been listening. It's a lot of mental energy to do what I do. And you need the time to do something to fill your cup. If you don't, again, what I see in any sort of law enforcement and so forth, because you can't smoke marijuana because you get drug tested. There's certain things you can't do, but I see a lot of anger problems, alcohol problems. And these are just the ways that we're trying to get relief from such a strenuous job. And it's so important, even with what I do, what I did in nursing and what I do with mental health, I need the time to recharge.
Yeah. And guys, look, the books, 5 left in stock. What are you doing here, Denise? You got a little tease there.
Well, I have a whole bunch here, so I'm sure they'll be happy to replenish them.
Yeah, and then we have Eric asking, what approach should correctional officers take when they suspect that an incarcerated individual is feigning mental illness? Now, I will mention this may cross into something a little bit controversial, so bear with me on this. If you can answer it, you can. If you can't, I understand. But so when it comes to feigning mental illness, I know that's not that easy of a call for mental health to say. I know that, and the reason why I know that is I discovered that when we have the inmates, there could be some inmates that are claiming transgender, so they get diagnosed with GID, gender identity dysphoria. And there are some places where you kind of know the inmate could be playing that game, but they don't want to put that the inmate's feigning GID to maybe manipulate going into a female facility. So first off, I mean, before we get to the correctional officers, how hard is it for mental health to say that an inmate is feigning a mental health illness? And you know, what would be, if they could do that, how would they be able to justify that? Would they look for motive?
Well, this is another, boy, everybody's asking really good questions. There's a lot when you're working with someone, you're listening to what they say, which is very important, but you're also using a lot of your intuition. Like, I don't know, this is all like not really making a whole lot of sense to me. You might not know why it doesn't make sense, but then what you've got to do is really sort of gather all the evidence, their energy, and what you said, Anthony, about motive. Yeah, we all have a motive. So what is their motive? What are they trying to do? What kind of feel do you get when you ask them a lot of questions? Because usually if they're not being really truthful or they're trying to manipulate and get away with something, that usually will show itself very quickly, because it's hard to sustain that you don't have some sort of ulterior motive.
Yeah, I want to mention something too. If you have an inmate that has a pattern and you start to see the end result of that pattern each time they do it, what I've done as administration is I bring the whole team up, custody, mental health, medical, whoever's involved in whatever this inmate's trying to manipulate. And then we have to make a decision that's on the same page, all of us.
Yes.
That's the key. So if mental health is ever gonna, put in, let's say, that feigning, then we have to have a fail safe for them as well. It's not like, okay, because the big thing here is, here's the concern with this, Eric, if I may, is if they're not recognized as being sincere because we think they're playing a game, they may want to bring more attention to themselves. So now we have to be able to put that net up. So it's like, okay, mental health, are you willing to do this? And then that will give us some option, because I think the biggest concern is when mental health, let's say, puts that feigning an illness, but then the consequences of that inmate's actions afterwards, correct? Is there always that concern of what could happen after that's done?
Yeah. And this is why it's so important to have a team, because I may see it one way, mental health, and then you may see it a different one. You're like, okay, but are you looking at this? Because he also is doing this, or she's also doing that. And sometimes it's really important for like a lot of different lenses to come in, and for us to come together and go, okay, what do we feel like is the best plan for everybody, for them and for everybody, to sort of give them the best chance, or her the best chance that they can for some sort of recovery and stability.
So do you think, right? So you think if the like upstream thinking, right? So if you think that if we had a good support team and we're all together, we're all on the same page, and you know, and literally patterns of behavior at this point, guys, it's messing with operations. Our manpower is just kind of always focused on this person. We feel is playing a game just to manipulate into a certain housing unit, whatever they're trying to do. At one point, if we're all on the same page, I think that alleviates some of the risk that usually stops people from wanting to take that jump, correct?
Great. I agree. Yeah. And that's why it's so important that you get some of these key people that are working with this person to come in and give some insight. But we used to have that when I was in critical care. We had treatment teams where we had pharmacy there, we had pastoral care, and everybody was coming in and sort of giving some input. And it was really helpful because a lot of things get missed when just one person is looking at it. So
and I agree with you 100% because I think there's two sides. Obviously, there's the reactive side, which is what develops the pattern. And then after a while, it's like, hey, guys, listen, guys, this is too much. The inmate knows that when they do A, we got to do B. So now all of a sudden we come back up and we look to B. Yeah, don't forget, we got the reactive measure in play, but we got to start putting a stop to this. And that's where we all have to be on the same page. And we also have to identify who takes the lead and who supports them. So like whatever. So if mental health comes in and they're the ones that are really behind what we need to do move forward, then we would go to mental health and say, kind of make it a pro-social thing. Mental health, we need your help. You lead the ball. You know, you take the ball. What can we do to support this initiative? And then what's cool about it is once the plan is in play, then we could always shift that priority. So now mental health did what they could. They're good. Now it goes back to custody. Now mental health will support custody in their endeavors, you know, in their endeavors.
And plus it sort of narrows down manipulation. Because if you can say, listen, we've had mental health in here. We've had this. We've already discussed it. And this is what we have decided. And then, you know, they can't play one against the other. Oh, well, mental health said this and you said that. And now I don't really know what's going on. And so, and these are maybe another time when I come back, we'll talk about personality disorders, because these are really important to think about when clients, because it's not only, you know, bipolar or whatever their anxiety, but there's also personality disorders that also factor in.
Yeah, we'll do a whole show on that. I mean, we still got, I mean, I'm on your time, so I'm going to keep on asking questions until you're tired. So, but yeah, this stays on the YouTube channel, so I don't have no time limit. As long as the audience is still engaged, I'm good. So I wanted to ask a question too, just on a side note.
Sure.
I know a lot of times when we deal with the inmate population, when there's a diagnosis, I feel like there's a question mark at the end of that diagnosis. Like it's a guess. And they're trying to, it's like, it's always guesswork. Like they're trying to treat it. But this is what they assume. I never feel that they're ever definitive about a true diagnosis. I mean, do you ever really get definitive behind a diagnosis, or most of the time, is it really just an assumption based on this?
Well, I am, as far as what I do, I can pretty much give a diagnosis in maybe 20 minutes. And so I'm not trying to say that to be so cocky, but I start off by asking maybe 20 questions, and I ask them pretty quickly. And as I'm asking these questions, such things as like medications, hobbies, do you consider yourself religious, trauma? And I go through it fairly quickly. And what I'm understanding, even from their health problems and their medication, is I'm sort of rewinding and understanding energetically how that all happened. And what happens when we don't process experiences or emotions in a healthy way is we block, this is what the book's about, so I don't want to be a spoiler alert, but we block energy in the body and eventually it manifests physically. So I can pretty much get a really good understanding, plus I've been doing it for a long time. So, you know, obviously I see a lot of patterns, but I have a pretty good understanding, pretty much 20 to 30 minutes. But I'm still asking questions. I'm still trying to really understand so that I just don't get like a couple answers and go, oh, I know what's going on, because I think that would be foolish. So, but yeah,
there's so many good questions, but I always wondered that was my own personal question just now, because, you know, I just, sometimes I feel that they just have so much trouble confirming a diagnosis. And part of it, believe it or not, guys, and just real quick, the reason why I'm thinking of it is, we have a lot of inmates that are looking to go to females facilities across the country right now, inmates that could be predators. And they will look to try to claim the transgender card and then get the diagnosis of gender identity disorder and then use that to manipulate their way into a female facility. And I've only seen at this time one person literally, or one mental health unit willing to put feigning GID. I've never seen. So I'm wondering, why is that so hard for people to do, especially when it comes to GID disorder? I mean, how would someone be able to diagnose that or say that the person's feigning that?
Well, for what I see, when I see people who are transgender, I see them when obviously on outpatient in a private, because I'm in private practice. So I see them mostly when they're transitioning from one to the other, from one sex to the other, and they're just having a tough time with either family accepting them and so forth. I don't see them in the prison system where they're using it as manipulation. But however, I imagine you all are masterful at understanding how quickly manipulative they can be, because that's sort of they're just very crafty.
Yes. And now I have two good questions. So I think this question from Eric's going to be a little bit longer. So let me hold that one for a second, because I know that's something you wanted to discuss. That was in our email. But let me give you a question I was sent my way from Alicia B. She wanted me to not miss this question from Navy Vet. And the question is, she texted me the question, by the way, because I couldn't find it in the chat. So it says, what do I do if my ex-husband, who has been convicted of 2 counts of aggravated murder, is due for parole? If he makes it, I have to keep hiding. He's been incarcerated for 40 years. Can he or is he rehabilitated? Well, I don't know if that's a mental health, but
my gut would say no, because when somebody is, and you can help me on this too, but the concern is when 2 counts of or 2 rounds of murder or 2 convictions, that makes me think automatically sociopathy. I mean, it's to kill someone and to go into the system twice. Then you wonder, because when we harm somebody, we should really not want to do that, because we would feel terrible about it. We would not want to inflict any sort of pain or harm. But when we do that, and we do it more than once, and we just keep getting out, because eventually that seems to happen, they will tend to still get into some sort of trouble.
Yeah, and sometimes, guys, I'll be honest with you, if you feel that they could be a concern, because usually what's going to happen is when an inmate gets released, they notify the prosecutor's office. The prosecutor office will then work with the victims to kind of let them know, hey, this is what's happening. The gentleman's due out, whatever it is. And, sometimes people put a restraining order on the individual right from the get-go if there's a concern that way. So even if the person doesn't pose a threat, there's still a violation if they violate the restraining order. So these may be things that you may want to work out before that person gets released, so you feel at least somewhat safe as best you could be. And then also, if you feel that there is a threat and you can prove that threat, the investigative divisions can also help you at the facility. But again, you have to realize something. There has to be something credible, for them to really start getting involved. So I think the best bet would be establish a restraining order once maybe even before the person gets released, in like a preventive measure. So Denise, this is going to be a question that falls into one of Denise's expertise. So obviously, the word solitary confinement, I'm going to tell you something right now. I don't like that word, because I know when inmates are pulled from population when they get in trouble, some people may call it administrative segregation, restrictive housing. Some states call it restorative housing because it's not punitive. It's like, let's move this guy away and then have them earn their stuff back before we introduce them to GP. Eric S. asks, what is Denise's opinion about the effects of increased time alone on mentally ill incarcerated individuals?
And I would imagine that would even make whatever they're struggling with even worse. We used to see it in the intensive care unit. People would come in, even healthy people, and they were hooked up to the monitor. And then obviously the monitor's going off all night long, and they're not really sure after day 2 whether it's night or day. It's 3 in the morning, 3 at night. And they used to get what they call ICU psychosis, or they would just start ripping everything off, and because they weren't sleeping and so forth. So you take somebody who's already mentally having some mental struggles, and then you isolate them, and that's even going to cause, in my opinion, a worse scenario.
And I want to mention something though. So I want people to know something. When an inmate is removed from population, they're not forgotten about. Actually, they're highly monitored from our mental health professionals to make sure they don't decompensate. I mean, the biggest thing is I wouldn't say that they lose contact with the outside world, because I've never seen that in my 20 years, but I will say that they lose out on some privileges. You know, because again, a prisoner is controlled through a loss first gain. Yeah, because a prisoner is controlled through a loss first gain system. I don't think the reward system works. I think it really is. I mean, you could reward to keep the behavior going, but when someone does something negative, I think there has to be some level of taking things away in an effort for them to earn them back. And then when they do good, you could keep rewarding it. I get it. Keep the momentum going, but don't use reward as a way to curtail negative behavior. I don't think it works that way. But right, and I think the big thing about taking the inmates out of the population is because at one point we have to worry about the rest of the inmates, and the greater concern here is I think the public, you know, generalizes. Okay, so this happened in Rikers Island. I get it. You know, horrible that it happened there, but that's not the approved practice. And when they go to make changes, they generalize that out as if that's the practice nationally, and it's not. It was a failed effort maybe on that end, but that's not how we do it on the bigger picture. And that is a tool that we utilize. But I will tell you, it's a controlled tool in all efforts to bring that inmate back to the population. But I, in my career, have never seen an inmate forgotten why they were there. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, because obviously it does.
Yes.
But I know it's not the defined norm. Would you agree with that? Like, what's it like for an inmate in, I mean, I don't even like to say the word isolation, but however you've seen it, I don't know. But what's it like for an inmate that in some segregation? It's okay. We're back.
Okay. So I missed the question.
Oh, so what in your experience, like what is it like a day in the life for an inmate that has been removed from GP and placed in some level of restrictive or restorative housing?
Well, you know, and it depends upon what that looks like. I did like what you said, though it's very important to enforce consequences or to take something away from them, because if you don't do that, then you're never going to get them to have any sort of motivation. So I do agree with that. It's just when they're completely isolated, then, you know, they sort of, you get alone in your thoughts. And a lot of times if you're already mentally ill and you're already like delusional or hallucinating, that can make it even worse. But I'm not really on that side, so I don't really know what that kind of looks like, you know.
So are you there, Denise? I don't want to lose you. Hopefully you come back. So I could fill it in while we wait. Hopefully she'll come back. But so basically, if you're on the other side of the coin, I know for a fact that those inmates are given offered programs every day. Let's see if we can get her back. Hold on, guys. She froze. They're offered programs every day. So the moment an inmate gets in trouble inside the correctional facility, so we do have institutional charges. The moment they get in trouble, and let's say they get found guilty and they're put into, let's say, restorative housing, automatically they're going to be seen from program providers. You know, they're going to get a list of all the inmates who were recently charged, who were found guilty, and then the service providers will come to. Let me see if she came back. Let me see. Hold on. All right, hold on. She may have to come out and come back. So they're going to get a list, and they're going to see those inmates every day to make sure that, hey, do you want to take a program, whatnot? And the reason why the service providers, like religious services, social services, education, the reason why they're going to go there, I got you. The reason why they're going to go there, it happens. Let me just remove this person here because I have you doubled. So let me kick you out there on that line. Okay, hold on a second, and that should take that person out. There it goes. So the reason why they're seen every day like that is because they don't have access to those services when they're in those secured populations. So the service providers, and guys, this is where the money comes in, because the service providers have to visit those units every day. So again, when they're in those units, visiting those units every day, they're also not, you know, if we're understaffed, that means we may have trouble doing programs for GP, because to be honest with you, if you had to choose where the priority, this is where the conflict is. If I'm short-staffed, do I make the program for GP a priority, or do I see those inmates in those restorative housing. And I want to tell you something, you got to see those inmates in restorative housing. You have to see those inmates there. So sometimes the programs can't be run because I don't have enough staffing to do both. And again, it depends on, the facility, but I have never seen inmates there that are totally forgotten. I have seen inmates that have been hard to manage. And I want to mention something else too. The inmates that find themselves there are usually the most problematic. So having said that, when people say, well, that level of punishment made him that way, no, that's what brought him in. He was already a certain way, and we've been trying to move this person forward. But at one point, and guys, I'm not going to say this to be harsh, but hear me out, because there's a softer side to this, but hear me out. At one point, a choice has to be made. What's best for the one versus what's best for the many. I mean, let's be honest, we have to make a choice, because I got 20 people ready to leave in a couple of days, and I got this one inmate that keeps pulling it back. And now the other inmates are starting to get pissed off because they can't move forward. So at one point, I know you get people that are doing the rights for the one, but the facility's like, hey, well, we got to care about the many. And that's where the conflict comes in. Conflict comes in with the battle of the one versus the many, where the facility stands for the many, not just the one. And sometimes you see the conflict there.
And that's when you got to make a tough choice.
It's never an easy choice.
Yeah, and you got to look at the big picture. And unfortunately, in these isolated incidences, when something goes wrong, it makes mass media, and it's like, oh, this is the problem, when it's actually really a small percentage that may happen. But,
hey, this is a great question from my boy Chris. Good dude. This guy is just an advocate for anything we do in corrections. He's my boy, my road dog. I'm gonna try to meet up with him soon. He just, I'm a big fan of Chris myself. He goes, what happens when someone gets out of prison? Is there a referral program they can have mental health help after leaving prison? I do have, can I say one thing first before we start, if that's okay? So I know if I have an inmate, I know right when the inmate's getting ready to release the prison setting, mental health is going to do whatever they can for placement, working with the family, whatever it is, because we don't want this inmate to fall back into the system. Believe it or not, that is their goal. So they'll start contacting family. The biggest concern we have is when we have inmates that are special needs and also homeless, where they don't have an address, they don't have family. And now what's going to happen is our mental health and social services will work together for placement, but social service takes the lead. Social service takes the lead, but does work with mental health. So in my experience, and I've been in administration, I've been in corrections for 20 years, administration for over 8. I've never seen our system send out an inmate to the streets. I've seen them send out, other places, but I'll mind you, if the inmate is maxing out and they're not on any level of parole or some level of supervision, we can give them these options, but we can't mandate them to go. So you can set them up, and then you find out that when they get out, oh, they're not going to this area, they're going over here. So, at one point that's it. We're limited at what we can do. But what's your thoughts? It's a great question by Chris.
And it's very true. I actually see most of my referrals that come from any sort of facility or some sort of drug rehab. I see some sort of inpatient psychiatric place where they want them to have ongoing outpatient therapy. And I can tell you, I have had one out of all the referrals that I've gotten that actually show up. And so that's the challenge.
Wow, that's interesting.
The facility will make an appointment for them. And finally, what I'll say is, have them call me and make sure, because, to schedule appointments, they do it and think, okay, you're all set. Go see Denise on this date. She's all ready for you. We sent out all your information, and they typically don't show up.
Yeah, see now, can I tell you something? So there's programs now in these jails and prisons that are starting to hold the community a little bit more responsible for that, which means they're going to try to get the community to do a little bit more, because that's always been the concern. I think we do a lot in our prison setting, but once they get released, we can't force them, but maybe the community could have some initiative there. But so I got some other questions. There's a lot here, so let me get to.
I was going to say, and even something like group counseling might be better, where at least for me, when I have an individual session, that's an hour. So if they don't show up, that's an hour that I really don't have much to do. So I mean, it's like it's an hour of my day, and if I have 2 or 3 don't show up, it's and then I have other people waiting to come in. but they have the spot. So,
and the biggest concern is the first year up to the third year, where they most likely tend to come back, after maybe failed efforts or relapsing in some cases.
yes.
Johnny Savage said, "What about the fakers? There's inmates hiding out in mental health programs who are not really mentally ill." Can I mention something real quick? Maybe this could open up dialogue a little bit. So sometimes our mental health units offer single cell housing, only because, again, you have an inmate that could be highly mentally ill, and maybe they're a threat to others. Now, granted, mental health could make someone single cell or make someone double cell. Usually when someone's double cell, it's because they present a risk to themselves, and we kind of place them next to someone, not hoping that they can stop them. But, you have someone next to you likely for you to do something. It lessens the probability. For the ones that are single cell, it could be because there's such a threat. But by the way, though, when they're single cell, they're watched. Now, we always have to watch out for people manipulating themselves into those treatment units, because there are single cells being offered, and a lot of people want single cells. You could have sex offenders that may want a single cell, or just someone that just wants to live on their own. So I definitely do believe there's always going to be a concern with people trying to manipulate their way in. And then here's the other thing, and I'm sure Denise would agree, how someone feigning that illness can affect the work being done by mental health in that treatment unit, right? So what's your thoughts on that question?
Well, again, when they come into the correctional facility, they're master manipulators. And I mean, that's just the name of their game. I mean, that probably got them in because, they manipulate and they steal and they will do whatever they got to do. And so they're very, very crafty, and they're looking for some sort of loophole to get what they want, whether it's a cell, whether it's a privilege or something like that. And certainly it's mental health. And even on what you do, we all have to take that into account, that there's always motive. And so when I was doing substance abuse counseling, it can be this way or that way. There wasn't a lot of options for them, because the more options that I gave, the more the manipulation started. And, that never really worked out.
Yeah. And then I like guys, there's really good questions here. There's a lot. I just want to make sure last week on Tuesday had, because they're adding stuff. One of my issues is when an inmate doesn't get what he wants, so he says he needs to talk to mental health, and it's more like they take advantage of that than try to give. Okay, so let's talk about that. Do you feel so? Let me add something real quick, Denise. Before maybe this helps out with a little bit of dialogue. By the way, you're doing great, but I'd like to add a little more. Yeah, because you're awesome. People are loving you. So I love having someone with your expertise just sharing out the knowledge. So I always tell my my service providers that you don't work for the inmate, you work for the agency. Don't eliminate the middle person, because if you eliminate the middle person, the moment you start thinking you work directly for that inmate, is when you start to get manipulated. Because again, you work for the agency who will help you guide the inmate, but you don't work for the inmate. And sometimes you'll have inmates that look to manipulate. And I've actually seen inmates say, well, you work for me. And then you have the mental health person or service provider in general actually feel guilty when they can't do something. Like, why do you feel guilty? Well, the rules got doing this, but this inmate stop. Don't feel guilty. If the rules are telling you to do it this way and the inmate's playing you out, don't eliminate the middleman. But what's your thoughts? I mean, do you think people that come into those helping roles, like mental health, medical, do you think they are automatically targets for manipulation?
Well, certainly they try, because I guess what they interpret, that because we're in mental health and we're there to help, that we're going to be very compassionate, which hopefully we are, but that they can also manipulate us for sympathy and so forth. And I don't know if it's just because I was a critical care nurse before or not, but I'm pretty intuitive and pretty straightforward. And I recognize motive very quickly, and then I navigate through that. I've seen it. I see it a lot, believe it or not, in private practice. A lot of people come in, they're very manipulative, especially in couples counseling. There's a lot of manipulation and so forth. And I can recognize that pretty quickly.
Is it usually related to recognizing a pattern to try to expose?
Well, and also it's not only what people say, but it's what they mean. They'll say something and they look to, usually when people come in and really tell me how, they just meet me and they give me a lot of compliments. I'm like, okay, let's just see where this is going. Cause
Right.
it's a little, I mean, it's one thing to say a couple of things, but when it goes on and on and on and on, I'm like, okay, I wonder what this is about. And not in a way that I'm paranoid, but I'm just trying to understand why so many compliments. What are they hoping for me to either accept or whatnot?
Yeah, I think where, and I want to get to 616 real quick, but I want to mention something. So I'm thinking of a perspective right now. So let's say I'm custody. I see the action, right? Mental health may see what they believe could be the intent behind it. And sometimes that could conflict, right? I mean, here I am seeing what this person did, and then mental health now has to kind of say, yeah, but this is why they did it. How hard is that to figure out?
For me, because I've been doing it a long time, not very hard. I mean, I know the questions to ask. And as I go through my questions, it's like I'm putting a puzzle together very quickly. I mean, I've done thousands and thousands and thousands. So again, it's, not only education, but experience and working in different, the body and mentally and emotionally, it can only do so many things. So I ask key questions that really gives me an understanding of how this happened and what needs to be done or what I can help them to try to change. Usually it's some sort of problem, but the problem didn't just happen. It manifested, it sort of evolved.
And guys, that's 1,000 before she hit 21.
Oh yeah, oh gosh, I don't even know how many thousands before I take my boards. Something like you have to see like 5,000 or something. You're always like counting, and
yeah. I mean, but can I tell you something? I always tell people we don't realize the routine work we do every day that adds up in knowledge. If we imagine, I know some people may say, well, I saw 1,000 inmates. That's my experience. Yeah, but imagine if you evaluate each one of those experiences. I think a lot of people like, oh, well, I've been in this profession 20 years and this person only been in 2. Yeah, but this person sits down and evaluates everything they've gone through, and you just passively go through it. So I agree. Like for someone, yeah, you may have, but you got, as I said, 1,000. Come on. I mean, even passively, that's you got it down packed. So 616 says something. I thought it's more of a comment, but I thought we can add to it. Mental health, I believe, is hard for many, many people to accept they have, especially men, because of the role that society expects them to uphold to. Let me ask you a question. When you have people coming to the jail, and again, this could be the first time that they're actually seen by mental health to be diagnosed, because I get a lot of inmates right now that will say that they don't believe that they're sick, and they go against their medication, and then they start falling backwards, and then you got to go through the whole process again because you can't trust them on their own to take their medication because they have no insight into why they're sick. So when you have someone coming through the jail at first and you're trying to convince them of a diagnosis so you can trust them into taking that medication, do you find a lot of people going against the diagnosis?
Well, again, I don't evaluate people coming through the jail. I was working more with the correctional officers and the importance of their own mental health and stability. Okay. So I was sort of on that end. So I can't really.
But what about in general? What about in general from your years experience? Do you find that a lot of people are resistant to the diagnosis, that they don't trust the diagnosis, and therefore they don't have the so if they don't have insight into what their sickness is, what's the likelihood that you could trust them taking the medication?
It's not likely. And like a lot of times, if we deny that we have something, then we really don't have to take any responsibility for it. And getting back to one of the questions about, we all struggle with mental health stuff. There are times when we're anxious. There are times where we have trouble with our tempers. There's a lot, we all at times will struggle with our own mental health and well-being. It's just really important that we establish at some point with a therapist from time to time. I have my own therapist, believe it or not, that I sort of check in with when I go through life's, ups and downs, and I just need somebody to help. So I really encourage everybody at some point to get some help.
Yeah, and I like what Andrew's saying, because a lot of people, they brought up the thing about sometimes people, let's say, will fake a suicide attempt, the manipulative. But I will tell you one thing: you treat every suicide attempt as real, because most of the time they're attention seekers, and the moment you don't run to it is the moment they go up a notch, and now their behavior really isn't a joke anymore. And I've seen it because now it's more about win-loss. So you don't believe me? Fine. I'm going to now jump off a little bit higher. And then they wind up, I think Eric said it best. I don't want to steal it, but Eric said, where is it? Eric basically said that some completed suicides are accidental. I'd say a lot of them are.
Yeah.
I'd say a lot of them are.
And I see it a lot on the private setting where with pills. You know, they think they take just enough that they'll be in the hospital and whatever they're getting, but they accidentally take too much. And, you know, so they overdosed before, but then this time they took too much.
Yeah. And then I have a good question here from Chris again. He says, do inmates reoffend to get mental health or to get it when they can't get it on the outside? So basically,
I would say no. I think I don't know that even people that are in the private setting value mental health as much. So for them to want to go into a facility just to get mental health counseling, there's too many other outpatient places where they could probably get it for free. Group counseling, NAMI is one of them where you can get a lot of support. So, I mean, there's a lot of places, and even like if you struggle with alcohol, there's AA meetings everywhere. I mean, there's a lot of support out there. It's just getting people to comply with that is the hard part.
And Navy, I just want to comment something. So I agree with you too, Navy. I don't think Eric, when he said it, was meant to generalize. I think he said, yes, some of them are accidental because I've seen inmates. By the way, not to minimize the people that you've lost, because yes, that's 100% accurate. Of course, I just want to mention something here. I've seen inmates that know an officer's coming down a tier and they're waiting for that officer, and they set something up, and then all of a sudden something goes wrong. One girl having a seizure and broke her neck. She didn't want to kill herself. She thought the officer was coming down, and she thought the officer was going to be there to protect her, but the girl had the seizure before the officer can make it down. So I believe, and the reason why we said it is I believe there are some, and we didn't say all, but there are some that don't want to take it that far. There could be an attempt to manipulate or definitely an attempt to get some attention. And then the moment, it's like, oh, that inmate does it every day, so we don't have to respond. Oh, no, you do, because the moment they don't feel they're getting the attention, they go up a notch. Now, mind you, for the inmates that are committed, that want to carry it out, it's luck when we find it. I mean, I'm going to be honest with you. It's just usually experience that says, man, something didn't feel right when I spoke to that person. Let me go back again, and you catch it on the in-between time. You know what it is. And then what we do is if we do catch it and we find it to be sincere, obviously, even if it's not sincere, you still have to do it. You put the inmate in constant watch so they can manage through those impulses, and then eventually kind of level them down to close watch, and then eventually probably double cell if it's definitely a pattern. But I'll tell you something. This is where the officers of mental health have to work, because the officers see the day by day, and sometimes mental health may only know what the inmate tells them. So mental health will sometimes call the officer and say, hey, anything happened with this guy today? Oh, yeah, he had a fight on the phone with his girl, which maybe on the outside is easy to handle. On the inside, it's not. But what's your thoughts on that? I mean, obviously we do have inmates that are going to be intentional with wanting to commit suicide. How hard is that to really prevent?
And what I said before about when people really want to do something or don't want to do something, there's not a whole lot that we can do. I mean, if somebody is going to take their life, we can do our best to prevent that and to help them as best that we can. But unfortunately, sometimes that's out of our hands. Probably when I come back next time, I'd like to spend some time to really talk about what leads to some people like taking their lives and what anxiety can look like. And I'd like to probably go into that more even for the correctional officer side of why it's so important because when we get so depressed, that's a very low vibrational energy, and it's just miserable. It's heavy and so forth. And a lot of people, that when we get to that point where we're that low in our life, we can't think of any options. Like you could say like, oh, you could do this. And they go, no, they feel like they're absolutely at the end, and they'll take their life. And it's very sad to see. And certainly the families are all really affected by that, family and friends and so forth. But there's some ways that we can talk about next time for like the correctional officer side, how we prevent ourselves from getting to that point, because it could be a slippery slope to get really, when we find ourselves really majorly depressed.
And would you guys like me to make, because we're going to have a few dialogues with her. I think I may start even having her on the panel if that's okay with her. Would you guys like to see this as a live dialogue? If so, just hit live so I know we'll make it live. But do you have a little more time or no? I don't want to hold you. I know I'm on your schedule.
How about like 10 more minutes?
All right. So let me see if I can get 2 more questions, guys. Hold on, guys, because there was a few more questions. But we definitely got to do this again. And maybe just kind of, because again, I'm on your time, whatever. So let me 616 said you better watch out because I'm going to pay you overtime. So yeah. So one more question from here. Does the standard of men, guilty minds matter when it comes to jail, prison, disciplinary? I don't know what that question is. Hey, Sakashi, do me a favor, rephrase that. If we can get to it, I will. I didn't understand the question on that one.
While we were reading another question, if you go on my website, there are some insights, and you can read about a lot of mental health struggles. I mean, that's just something. I think I have another podcast on there. So hopefully, there's some information because I try to really teach to help people learn how to make some changes in their lives so that they feel better.
Right. And guys, listen, so she's going to be live. So in the meantime, I'm going to have her come back on and we're going to talk about officers' health. In the meantime, I do have some videos up there. If you go on my playlist, I have mental health. It's a whole section on mental health, guys. We discussed it, but I definitely want to get Denise's perspective. But let me ask you one more question. Sure. I guess this will be the last one. Okay. What type of training do you think custody has to have when it comes to dealing with mental health inmates? And there's a part 2 to that question, but can you answer that part first? Because I know you teach.
You'll have to like break that down because you used a different language, and since I'm not in the jail, I don't really. I'm not quite clear on the question.
So basically, when I know that you were training staff. So when it comes to training staff, what are some of the areas that you believe should be trained to staff so they maybe have a level of compassion or empathy towards an inmate that's suffering through mental illness?
Well, when I was working with the staff, the correctional facilities, and Major Klusnick was sort of made that a mandatory thing. And what I was trying to really help them with is dealing with their own mental health. I mean, you all are in a really, really tough profession, constantly on high alert. When I was just listening to all the things that you have to sort of consider, there's a lot of stress with that. And if we don't learn how to address our own mental health and our own ways of dealing with the stress of that, we're going to start to have a lot of emotional symptoms. Anger is one of them, very intense anger, anxiety, depression. And then these will lead to some unhealthy coping mechanisms if we're not careful. So that's what I was doing with the within the jail.
Well, maybe there's a way, if it works for you, if we ever want to teach it, I could record it on this and then we could send it out just to hit the masses. I mean, it's up to you. It's your call.
Love to.
Yeah. And then the other question that I had, that was a part B to this before you go, is, is there, I know a lot of inmates suffer from many mental illnesses, and I think maybe on our next episode, I could just have you lead the way and you could just break down the different illnesses that we see come across in the jail setting. But is there a general way to approach them, or is it really specific depending on what their concern is? Like, you have any tips and tactics that may be specific, or is it generalized?
Well, first of all, it's what symptoms are they showing? Is it if they're paranoid, delusional, or hallucinating? Okay, you have to understand that they're not quite in reality, and therefore you have to really watch your own safety as well as to try to protect their safety, because they're in crisis because they're not, they're sort of envisioning things that really aren't there. So that would be a little bit different than somebody just having extreme anxiety. A lot of people who are dabbling in substances as you know, they come in very edgy. And they're sort of, especially depending upon what they're taking, but they can also hallucinate, but they're very anxious, very paranoid, and so forth. And again, number one priority is safety. Make sure that they don't get harmed and that you don't get harmed. So that would be one of the things that I would encourage. Go ahead.
Well, Denise, we're going to be having you on again. I know you had to go. So do you have anything like to say in closing, things you want to promote or email, whatever it is? And then I'm going to probably stay on for a little bit and talk to everyone a little bit.
Certainly my website, DeniseSchonwald.com. And I know I have a little bit of a challenging name, but go on there. You can contact me through there. If you have any questions, if I could answer anything for you. You have a link or saw my book. It's on audiobook, Kindle. You get it from Amazon. I'd be happy to send you a copy also.
That's awesome. And I'll have you on again. I think the next one we'll do is we'll focus strictly on the officer's health.
I think that would be great.
We definitely did cover a lot about the inmates' health today a little bit. And then I would like to focus. I already have the idea for the different types of mental illnesses. And then you mentioned the suicide. You said you want to do something related to suicide.
Well, I want to talk about how that sort of manifests. So, I mean, when we struggle with something, whether it's depression, anxiety, and so forth, that doesn't just happen. That evolves. And so these are some things that we can look at with how to know when we're sort of going down a really dark road. So,
well, this is awesome, Denise. Thank you for coming on. I'll probably reach out to you later in the week and we'll set up another show and we'll have it go live. So maybe we'll do a mental health. Maybe we'll do one if Friday or Thursday works for you. Just let me know and we'll do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So maybe we'll do Friday if that works. Maybe Friday we'll set one up.
It works well.
All right. Take care, Denise. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I appreciate it.
All right. I'll stay on for a little bit. All right, guys. She was awesome, guys. She was awesome. Let me just get her out of the studio there. So, because I have she froze. Let me just see. No. She was awesome. I thought she was. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. So there's a couple of questions I thought I could answer real quick because I know she had to go. One of the questions was related if we do anything for here. All right, so let me answer this question. So for Michael Boyce, what are some programs for us to ask to have the facility add for officers' well-being? We have a peer-to-peer support that kind of works, and a living resource program that we have had some higher admin state doesn't return calls. Okay, so I don't know. I don't know if these are equivalents, but so one thing is you want to have like what we do where I'm at is you want to have an employee wellness committee. They're awesome, but again, you got to have it led by people that care, and the people that are involved have to care. And what they do is they host events, food trucks, stuff like that. But they basically, try to show staff that they're appreciated. I mean, that's a big thing right now in any profession, but especially in corrections, is that we're trying to put committees together that show people, the workers, that they are appreciated and more importantly, that their voice counts. I'm part of an initiative right now called CEMI. It's called the Committee of Employee Morale and Innovation. And basically it's about staff having a voice. And basically, if you look at it, it's CEMI, CEMI, CEMI. It's a pioneer program. Just some really good people on the team. It's really basically to get people to know that their voice matters, to try to connect them to the vision of what we're trying to push so they feel value behind the work they do. Because right now, guys, working in corrections, you're going to be overburdened. You're going to be overwhelmed. So you got to promote some level of value or, a deeper meaning of purpose, because I can't control you not getting overtime, not during these times. There's a lot of things I cannot control. So I don't want to give up. I just got to look at the things I can control. But then I also have to go back to the people that work in the front line and say, what are the two things you can control? Attitude and effort, right? So, like Alan Stein would say, so there's a partnership here. We try to introduce you to some specific appreciation for what you do, the milestones that people don't usually recognize. Because here's the funny thing, guys. A lot of us look to recognize somebody for an event, something external. And having said that, we barely ever look to appreciate people from the inside out. So a lot of things get overlooked when you're looking just to recognize. I mean, imagine someone that works faithfully in a position for years, but the employee month goes to an officer who saved someone's life. Yeah, we need that. Don't get me wrong, but that's a recognition award. Let's not use that as a way to substitute for the appreciation that should be given every day. So I think a wellness committee is good with that. I also think a SISM team is definitely needed. It's more of a reactive team. So if something happens on site, like a death of a staff member, God forbid, a major assault, even a death of an inmate, guys, could affect staff. You have a team that comes in. It's a critical incident stress management team that talks to staff, and it's a peer-to-peer. So I think Michael had mentioned that. So I think, to be honest with you, what you have is already in the right direction right now. SISM, a wellness committee. But again, it really is dependent on the people that lead those committees. If you have people that don't care about the initiative and they're just doing the committee because they've been assigned to it, that's not what you want to do. You want to go to each facility and literally make it a volunteer position, because you don't want someone that's assigned to it who's going to half-ass it. Like, well, all because you're in that position, that means you're chairperson of the committee. No, I mean, listen, it doesn't have to be someone from the executive staff. It could be someone from the front line. And then you as administration, you give them the power to be the chairperson. You're the chairperson. So, and by the way, when you're the chairperson of a committee, it doesn't matter the titles of the people that are around you. At this committee, you're the chairperson. So having said that, I want to look for somebody that when I say, hey, I need a wellness committee here, these are the things I want to do, I want people to go, yeah, I want that. Okay, come on, let's see what you can do. Let's see what you can offer. As opposed to, we got to do a wellness committee. Let me go ahead and just assign Joe or Eric on it because, I don't want to do it. So let me go push her off to Joe and Eric. And Joe and Eric, they're overwhelmed. They don't want to do it. And the problem is the wellness committee, or even a committee like CISM, or what I said, the CME committee, they have to be priority committees, because it deals with the wellness of your staff. So it's not something that, you want to force somebody into because you already don't have the momentum. Listen, when you create a committee, you got to have momentum, man. And I'm going to borrow that from the person that volunteers. Hey, this person wants to do it. That person's got momentum. Take that, put them there, put them at the top, let them chairperson it. And believe it or not, that vibe, it's connected. And most likely, guys, the people they bring in are like-minded people, because we tend to attract the people we're similar to. Let me see. Hold on. Okay. What's this? I'll be working shift C in the captain's unit after academy. What should I expect working that position? Hey, let me ask you a question. Is shift C overnight? I just want to make sure. You're talking about the overnight shift. Can you respond back and I'll answer that question? And this is a great thing from Eric too. The employee assistance program referrals often utilized as part of the disciplinary process, a way to demonstrate that management tried to counsel the employees before punishing them. You know what? Can I mention something? Eric's spot on. A lot of the measures that could have been used to balance staff out have been seen as punitive because they happen on the back end of a failure, as opposed to us trying to be preventive and showing we care. So for a while, there's been the use of these programs that really should have been beneficial for staff, but how it was being employed now becomes punitive. So like I like what Eric said, if I was to say, hey, you got to go to EAP, I ain't going there. They're gonna, what do I need that for? People that go to there, they get fired. I don't want to go there, so I think we messed up on that. I think Eric's spot on that. Spot on like you wouldn't believe. I think we messed up on that. We have defined the use of that as the back end of a failure at some level. And then when you go to recommend the resource, people are afraid of it. Even if they need it, they're afraid of it. And then they question management's intent because, well, it was used in the past like this. So why are you sending me there? And you could have good management. So good management can come in and say, you know what? EAP would work well for you. And I could be good management. I could want to do things for the right reasons. But the history of how the program was used just bastardized my efforts. That's spot on by Eric. That's a very good perspective, because that's something that we have to rebrand 100%. We have to let people know that these programs that we have that are an effort to assist you and your concerns are not punitive. And I'm sorry that you see it that way. What can I do to show you that it's not? Even if it's me walking you through it. But that's our fault. That literally is the agency's fault, 100%. So Andrew said was assaulted a few months back, and then a few officer staff members were attacked a month later. We check up on them. And okay, so Andrew, that's great. So what Andrew's talking about is, by the way, our peers are always going to be our greatest support, and then our family, of course. But like an assault on staff is definitely something that you always want to lock down the facility when any staff is hurt or injured or killed, because the officers, the people that have to do the job, are going to be affected by what just happened. The program providers, they're all going to be affected. And I know sometimes the public pushes to rush through these lockdowns because they're more concerned about the inmates that are locked down. But the problem is we got to be concerned with staff, because they may not be ready to deal with this. A lot of staff, I mean, it's not our fault, guys. We're trapped in a building. If we get attacked by an inmate, and let's say even that inmate, is no longer in the facility, the reminder of the uniform the inmate wears could trigger us. So we have to get the teams in play, talk to staff, and make sure we're in the right mindset before we start to slowly open the facility back up. And I love the fact that you have the peer-to-peer support, but again, I mentioned it earlier in the show, peer-to-peer is a part of it. You as a person still have to talk to someone that you can trust, because your peers are always going to help you get you to move forward in your job. And don't get me wrong, you have peers that aren't just your peers. You have peers that are your friends. That's different. They're people that know you outside the uniform. That's going to be a whole different approach. But what I mean by the job peers is usually they want to get you motivated. Hey, let's get you back on, whatever, keep you moving. The people at home know you. They know who you are. So that's the foundation before you can even move forward in the job. So I have no problem if something affected me at work. I have no problem telling my wife that affected me. Not my position. That shit hit me. I mean, I've had people, guys, that have gotten mad at me, and I get it because I'm admin and maybe I had to do something that they didn't like. And at the end of the day, I get it. They hate me because of the position, because of what I had to do. But there are some people that they zing you. And it's like, man, I had to do that because I was admin. But man, I felt that like Anthony. Like that person just came in and went right through the shirt and the tie and hit me as an individual, and sometimes that could affect us. Sometimes we go home and we go to vent. I mean, the one thing about the cliche is you don't want to take the angry emotion home. I get that, but to not talk to your loved ones about what's happened to you on a day-by-day basis, because I think it's your loved ones that motivate you to move forward. I mean, literally you to move forward, to keep going. And again, to eliminate them from that, I think is unfair, because don't forget too, guys, change is slow and subtle. So all of a sudden, when you go to need their help, but you haven't involved them in the process, they don't even know who you are anymore. So they can't help you because you're no longer Anthony. You're not the Anthony I married. Why didn't you ask for help 6 months ago? Now you're asking for help, but you've already fucking transformed and you pushed everyone you love away. But the ones that stick by, those are keepers, though, because they're going to go through the struggle and they're going to try to get you back to where you should be. So again, if you don't want to have those regrets along the journey of this profession, catch it, go home, talk to you, and help them help you. That's the key. Help them help you. But again, if you're lost, there's not much people could do for you. So you also have to know exactly who you are and where you want to be. I mean, that to me has always been key. So we got some more questions. Hold on. You guys can ask questions. I'm here for a little bit. So if you guys want to ask some questions, if I can answer it, I will. We have Joe in here too. Jojo Papano. What's up, man? Let's see. Yeah. Some EAPs are, Joe. You're right. We have it too. They're voluntary. The union can even help get you in, but sometimes. Well, that what, and sometimes it's management that will force people in as a catch-all. And that's the problem. There should be some good intent behind that. I am lost all the time. 616. Hell yeah, I am. I'm always lost. Let me see. Where's Andrew? I was out 2 weeks. Could have taken more time off, but knew if I didn't go back soon, it would be harder for me to go back, and didn't want that. Yeah, what's funny, guys? Andrew, that's spot on. I can see why Alicia commented. Excellent realization. I'm going to tell you something, guys. The hardest thing is in corrections is when you go through something major to have to go back into the same environment and pick up where you left off. And it's funny because a lot of people, they push for the physical. Hey, I know your knee was damaged. Are you good? You're good to go back. And no one ever asks, how are you mentally? That should be asked more, but more importantly, that should be asked of you too inside. And I want to ask you, mention something else too, guys. The questions you ask matter, the thoughts inside your head. Sometimes we get so caught in our own negative thoughts that we trap ourselves. So we have to always ask ourselves, what type of questions are we actually asking ourselves? Are we asking questions that motivate us? Or are we asking questions that drain our energy? I mean, most of the time, and by the way, that's deep shit. You may need somebody with you when you do that, because like, I'll give you an example. If I see someone that's less motivated at the job, the first thing I'll ask them is why. And I try to get down to the questions that they're asking themselves in their head to push them forward. And most of the time they're negative questions. They're questions in which they feel trapped and that they can't move forward. And then it's a matter of shifting that perspective. So, in a profession like corrections, and to be honest with you, in a lot of professions, it's easy to find the negative. It's easy, so you have to try to shift where you're looking. you know, and that's hard. That's where you may need assistance. I have people that help me. I mean, I can't always find the positive sometime, and somebody has to sit me down and say, yo, you know, you got to stop looking over here, start looking over here. Because again, when you start looking at the negative, it's you know, finding the negative is passive in almost anything you do. I mean, really trying to find the positive during these rough times is intentional. So, I mean, you have to put the effort in that, you know, and I hopefully, you know, for me, I try to do that for others. And then there's people that do it for me. I mean, it's funny because I know what I should be doing, but I'm human just like everybody else. And I fall back all the time. But then you have that network that reminds you of that, you know, and then you're just there for each other on just a high level. Again, if you don't take that spinning screen off here, I might have to smash your screen. What spinning screen? What's she talking about? 616, come over here and smash my screen then. I have no idea what spinning thing she's talking about. Guys, what do we see spinning? What's up, Jay? What's going on, guys? So again, I think right now, at least for our mental health, if there is a concern, and I know some people are like, well, I don't want to go to management. I don't trust their intent. Go. This isn't about the job anymore. It's about you. So if it's being offered to you, take it. I mean, guys, you don't want to make matters worse. I know a lot of times people, they look for excuse not to take it. And they look at management, even if it's based on good intent, and they won't take it. Well, this is about you now, guys. This is literally about you. So you have to make the choice, jump in and let the chips fall where they may. Because at the end of the day, the last thing we want is for you to take yourself out. You know, there was an issue that happened the other day. There was an issue that happened the other day in California. I want to read this to you guys. This is scary. Let me just give me a second. I want to get the article. I wonder if they made a video of it. I wonder if they made oh, I didn't know you guys saw that. Hold on, guys. Hold on. Okay, because I see what you're saying. I only see my one screen. So I didn't know that person can still be seen. She's froze on my screen. Damn. I can't get that off, guys. Let me try this way. What about now? Hopefully, maybe I went down to one. Maybe it's better now. I didn't know that. Wish that had been told to me sooner. I can't see that, guys. I only saw myself. I didn't see the other person's screen. Let me read you this thing from California, guys, that was sent my way. Horrible situation in California. Just give me a second. I want to read the article. I just have to find it. Jojo mentioned it earlier, too, as well. Hold on one second. Hopefully I'm back. Let me see. News. I think this is it right here, guys. I found it. Wait, you guys can't see me now? Can you guys see me? Yes or no? Oh, now I'm gone. Can you guys see me? Tell me if you guys can see me, guys, because her screen froze, so I can't remove her. Can you at least okay, so guys, I have to do it this way, guys, because her screen froze. Maybe I could do it this way. Maybe I can make it a little bit better. Hold on. Yeah, guys. Sorry, guys. I can't. I don't know what happened there. Her screen is blocked. So bear with me, guys. It froze that part of the screen. Let me read you what happened, guys, in Wasco State Prison. In Bakersfield, California, a correctional officer at Wasco State Prison. Oh, there's a video here. Hold on, guys. I'm going to show you guys the video. Would you guys want to see the video? The news report? All right, I'm going to listen to 616. I'm not going to touch anything. I could show you guys the news report. Hold on one second. Hold on. The video connected to the story. Give me a second. Let me see. It's not popping up. Let me just read it to you. All right, let me just read it to you guys because it's not popping up for some reason. So basically, a correctional officer at Wasco State Prison barricaded himself in a section of the prison with a firearm from Friday night to Saturday morning, according to the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. Correctional Officer Schonwald, just after 9 p.m., barricaded himself in a building on the north side of the prison used by staff to control and supervise inmates, according to the department officials. Prison officials activated the crisis response team and incident command post and communicated with Wilder. Officials, with the assistance of teams from other prisons, managed to convince Wilder to drop the gun and surrender at 6:37 a.m., according to the department officials. Wilder was arrested on suspicion of assault with a gun, bringing alcohol, drugs into prison, and exhibiting a gun, and is due in court Wednesday. So how crazy is that? And then we had the 5 inmates that escaped from, yeah, I heard about that. I read that on Corrections 1. They all escaped from the sex offender unit. Guys, I'm telling you, there's a lot of crazy stuff here. I got to start maybe doing stuff that talks about real, in the moment. That just happened, Alicia. Very interesting story there. It was 5 inmates on the run after escaping from Missouri jail, driven off in a stolen vehicle. 5 inmates are on the run after escaping from Missouri jail and driving off in a stolen vehicle, officials said. The men forced their way through a security door at St. Francois County Jail, then moved to the roof of the building and eventually onto the ground around 7 p.m. on January 17th. Surveillance video spotted them 15 minutes later in the parking lot of a nearby business, and they are accused of taking off their orange jail clothing, and they're all from a sex offender unit. Thought that was interesting. So here's what I'm going to do, guys. I'm going to have Denise come back on. We'll discuss some more stuff relating to our mental health. If you guys have any questions, let me know. Yeah, guys, that's another thing. We had that fentanyl concern. I know there was one. Well, the big one that happened was in Illinois, but then there was another one that also happened possibly in Tennessee, where they believe it was staged and fentanyl went up in the air, where there was, thrown in the air up through the HVAC, and it took out a lot of staff, but having said that, guys, that's another thing that's on the rise is fentanyl. I can have a show on that too. I can have someone from crime scene management that is expert on fentanyl and talk about the process of dealing with it. How do they try to track it? Because it could come through anything, come through the mail. It can come from people doing foolish stuff on the outside and then bringing it in. But, that's one of our biggest concerns. And guys, when it comes to fentanyl, it's unique because fentanyl also makes your heart race. So when you have an inmate having a heart attack, and some staff may be hesitant to run in there because you don't know if the heart attack is related to it truly is, the person's health, or if it's because there's fentanyl in the room. So you get staff that get nervous just jumping right into medical codes right now because they don't know if there's going to be fentanyl or if the inmate's really actually having a heart attack. Well, that's the funny thing. So to be honest with you, in COVID, you would expect, because the facilities were locked down, you would expect contraband to have kind of cut back. But in most cases, it did it. In some cases, it actually increased. So when it comes to how drugs get into a facility, I mean, there's many ways. They say the number one way could be staff, but that doesn't define us. It's just there's a few that are in this profession for the wrong reasons. But then there's other ways, anyway, I mean, mail, vendors, the list can go on, visitors. I mean, the list can go on with how stuff can get into a controlled facility, but most of the time I will tell you something, we are on the top of it because we may have some that gets through, but for the most part, we do have dedicated staff doing their best every day to stop it. We even have equipment out there that can check for it, but the more innovative we get, the better that they get at smuggling it in, so we always, it's like we never catch up, but we catch it. But then the moment we catch it, they try something new. And it's just, and remember, guys, they're innovative because this is what they do every day. This is what they plan to do every day. And they're constantly thinking about it. They'll find ways to do it. For us, it's an 8-hour day or 16-hour day job in some cases. But we get our breather. But when you have the willpower to want to do something, you'll make it happen. And all of a sudden, these obstacles that we think we have in play that should be working, they find out a way to go around them. Why doesn't all officers be trained in and required to carry Narcan to help them? Well, a lot of states do. A lot of states do offer the officers Narcan, and they do have to carry it on their person. My state in particular is one. I think that's something that most states should be doing by now, especially when we had the fentanyl scare, a few years back. Now we're starting to get it. Excuse me, we're starting to get a little bit again. The sad thing is with a lot of agencies, they figure, well, this hasn't happened in our state, so we'll wait. And they wind up becoming reactive. And then there's some agencies like, holy shit, we're not going to have that happen here. Let's start pushing for the Narcan. So for the states that aren't doing it, shame on you, especially now after what just happened in Illinois. And I believe something happened in Tennessee as well. But if you don't have your officers trained in Narcan, what's funny with that too, by the way, a little side note on that. When we started issuing that out, just in general, across the country, whatever it was, wherever facilities do it, a lot of the officers didn't want to do it because they thought that was medical's responsibility. So they only at first thought it was for the inmates that were overdosing. But then when it started hitting staff, just a touch of a white speck and your heart's racing and everything, we became the first responders for our staff. Because like, you know what? Give me it. Because if this shit's going rampant right now, the faster we can get that Narcan to that individual, the better. So again, so that motivate us to say, you know what, let us carry the Narcan. If the inmates need it or the officers need it, we'll have it in our person and we can get it to them a lot quicker. So Chris says, I have Narcan on me always, even going to my college because we have a lot of homeless people riding buses. Yeah, guys. I mean, they also, some states, when an inmate gets released, and they're going through the process of getting released. And so when an inmate gets released, there's a lot going on, but there's going to be a table that's going to make sure all the paperwork's correct and the inmate has everything that they need when they get released, including medication. And there's a lot of facilities, because they do have a concern that an inmate can overdose, that they do let the inmate leave with Narcan. And here's the funny thing is after the inmate leaves, they have like a little thing in Narcan. When the inmate leaves, the Narcan is the first thing they throw away. It's like right outside the facility. So it's like you give them what they need and then they don't want it on their person. Let's see. All right, so that's a good question. Prison yard. So most prisons should be no-fly zone. If we ever catch drones that are flying over the facility, you call it in immediately. I mean, if the tower will catch it, they'll make the call to center control, and then we'll decide from there what actions need to be taken. I mean, a lot of facilities, because it's hard to control the drones, they put nets up. I think that's where a lot of facilities are going now, to put some type of net to catch any contraband that could be dropped from the drones. I mean, to be honest with you, drones are pretty much used to bring the contraband from a higher level into the controlled yard. I mean, it's not used to map out areas, because you can go on Google Maps now and look at a whole freaking facility. So the drones, when I see a drone flying over our facility, I automatically think contraband, and then it's just a matter of finding out where they're flying it from. Some of these drones are expensive. Some of them are super cheap. Like you can get a drone now for $30, and those people don't care what happens to the drone. They don't. But then they're expensive ones that, they care about, so again, but drones are a threat, and a lot of facilities now are stepping up in that defense. But again, I think the net over the yards or something matters, because if you're not doing that, you're not protecting yourself, because the drones are the most recent threat to our facilities right now. Let's see. Yeah, see, Johnny even said he read an article about the drones dropping drugs into the prison grounds. I'm working on something for TV, a TV network or whatever comes through. It's a big network, and a series of the videos are all about drone drops. The contraband that's coming in from the drone. Dude, you have people that even use animals. They'll put drugs on an animal, a pigeon, a cat, and then they'll just throw the cat over the wall, or they'll do something with a pigeon and tie it on their ankle. So there's many ways that that fucking drugs find their way into that yard. Yeah, I think so, Alicia. I think that's true, because you're flying. A lot of these people that have the drones, they may not even realize that they're flying over no airspace. Prisons is one of them. You can't fly over a prison. So a lot of the people, I believe, yeah, they should be doing that. Why not? Because, listen, people could be flying drones and they don't know what they can fly over or not. I mean, I'm sure there's people that have flown drones over a prison without realizing that's supposed to be flying over a prison. So yeah, I do think they should be registered because, again, if the drone breaks, then we're able to find out who owned that drone and start holding them responsible. And you can go right to the store where they bought it from. So I agree with that. I think they should be registered 100% only because of how they're being utilized. Yeah, Eric says because cats always land on their feet. Yeah, look, they're using dead birds to drop the drugs into the facility, putting the contraband into the hollowed out dead birds and closing them up and dropping them in the yard. Yep. Well, different types of dead animals they would. And then they throw the animal over the yard. Criminals like 10 years ahead in technology for the drugs are always looking ahead of us. You know why? And I agree with that. So again, this is your lifestyle, so if it's your lifestyle, this is what you devote your mind to. And the more you devote your mind to it, you find solutions. That's why I tell people, it's like, there are certain things where, maybe you kick yourself in the ass a little bit. Like I should have picked up on that. Like, why didn't I pick up on that? And it's like, okay, you got me this time, but you're not going to get me again. But man, there's some times where there's just no way you would have thought of it. And then maybe hindsight bias, it's like, it simplifies it, but it's like, nah, I wouldn't have thought of that anyway. Like, there's no way I can look back and think of doing something that way. And it's like, man, where does your mindset have to be to think of some of these things? And it's like, well, that's because they're there all the time. I mean, think about it, guys. You're in a cell for, whatever, however long a day, for years. You're any obstacle, you're going to find a way around, because what the funny thing is, it's not even just the obstacle. The people that control the obstacles, they're going to find complacency in the routine. They're looking at every individual and how they do their job, and they look for the person that doesn't do it to the best of their abilities, and that becomes their first avenue. So I mean, again, this is just literally just, and I agree. I mean, they're very proactive. I mean, this is what they do. And then we have to react. But there are times where you catch something and it's like, man, lucky. Like, lucky I saw that. And then there are times where it's like, if something does happen, I've had it where it's like, man, I should have caught that. I slipped up. Usually when you're complacent, you kick yourself in the ass. You kick yourself and it's like, man, I should have caught that. Damn it, I should have caught that. What the hell's wrong with me? But then they're the ones where it's like, it doesn't matter. You could be intentional as hell. It's like, that's how inventive some of these inmates could be. Andrew said a year ago, we caught a guy on the roof of the U-Haul trailer in motion, throw a black packet of cell phones over the wall, and luckily they got it in time. Yeah, and I like what Julie says. Julie said they have all day to conjure up who knows what. Oh, yeah, I got to get a mug for 616. I have the Tier Talk mug somewhere. I have them on order. I got to get them. I got to get them. I got to just try to make sure I go to my guy. Well, that's for Shutterfly, but I also have hats. Yeah, let me work on that, guys, because I think I could do it. I just got to order them in bulk. I've been lazy. I've been doing a newsletter, though. So if you guys want to check out the newsletter, and even though it's corrections, guys, it's advice that you could pretty much, apply anywhere. I mean, that's the goal of it all. I'm having fun with that. I'm doing it with a friend of mine. She formats. I just write the articles, and we try to do one twice a month, try to release it. I was going to have other people submit, but then, I don't know. I think my writing styles are a certain way, and I'm trying to look for certain things and, to connect with the reader. You only have one chance to really get it out there and impress people. And then eventually what I would like to do with the newsletter is, because it goes out to so many agencies, is to maybe have a sponsor connect to it so we can keep it moving, so I can pay for it pay the person that's helping me. I mean, that's the key. And then there she is. Look at that. Helped her, showed her love. And then, well, she didn't call me an asshole. She said my behavior was assholish. So I'll accept that. Yeah, no, I didn't say that, Joe. Okay, so Joe gave me an article, and I wouldn't say that was my response, Joe. But Joe gave me an article. Yes, I forgot Joe was in here. Damn it, shit. Joe was the first person that gave me an article, and that's what I decided. Let me go solo. Let me go solo. That's pretty. Yeah, I'm sorry, Joe. I didn't know you were in here, man. Damn. Let's see. Joe also says the one he hates are the obese visitors that are wearing spandex, looking like busted cans of biscuits, packing drugs in their purse. Hell no, I'm not cataloging that. Joe's back. Joe's out for a second, but Joe's back. Yeah. So anyway, guys, so I'll have Denise back on. Maybe I'll have Joe on maybe sometime later on the weekend. If I do, it'll just be impromptu. Maybe I'll talk to Joe tomorrow night or something, depending on how the day is. If we do, we'll do it late. We'll do it like around 10 or 11 hour time on the Eastern side. So, maybe if Joe wants to do something, I'll touch base with Joe. And then I'll have Denise on next Friday, and we'll do the, I want to do the different diagnosis, actually. I want to go through the different types of mental illnesses. I think that would be interesting. And, oh yeah. Wait, hold on, guys. Eric's spot on this. New training class, how to maintain your composure when dealing with visitors. Yeah, dealing with the phone calls too, of the families. Guys, what's funny is prison and jail, a lot of the laws that are being passed have actually entitled inmates, which also eventually entitle their family members. So, like, I've never gotten a phone call where someone had said, "Hey, thank you for all you do. Thank you for incarcerating my loved one. We appreciate that." Like, we don't get phone calls like that. We get yelled at and we get blamed. So, having said that, if you guys want to ask a question, just put one up. If I can answer it, I will. But having said that, that to me is probably the most draining part of the job, is dealing with the visitors, or dealing with the phone calls. Thank God I don't have to do that much anymore in my position, but I hear it all the time, and I envy. That's a whole different battle in corrections. Trust and believe that. And I envy the people that do that. That's probably a lot of clerical staff that do that. Would love Denise's information for a book of hers too, if possible. Would love to read that. We need that here in Washington State so bad. Yeah, I'm going to read her book. I'm going to order it on Kindle, and I'll read it on Kindle. But yeah, I want to read her book too. Oh, look at this. She actually thanked us. Good job, 616. I appreciate that. Can you just randomly call us and thank us too? Like, you should make that your mission. Call every jail and prison across the country and thank them. It will go a long way. If you have time. I don't know. That could be a bit time consuming. Let me see. Hold on. She said, yeah, because they didn't catch her fiance on the high he was on, he wouldn't be here. You know what's funny, guys, real quick? A lot of people don't see it the way 616 sees it. Obviously, because we're the bad guys, because, the person was sent that way. But think about what else they could be doing. That's a good perspective, because at the end of the day, we're stopping a lot. I know some families that know that if their son wasn't locked up or their daughter wasn't locked up, that they would have, probably been dead. And we don't get that a lot. Andrew said he shook a guy down on and found drugs on, and he called his wife to call the facility to say I targeted her husband and played the race card. Yeah, we get that. But when they get caught, I do thank you that my ex-husband is incarcerated and hope he doesn't just spend a minimum of 40, but max to life. Now, remember what I told you, Navy vet, if you know he's getting out, I like what Joe said before about the victim services and the advocates, but also work on getting that restraining order. People do that. Now, listen, the reason why I'm saying the restraining order, I know that works because, again, it puts the person in a position where if they're by you, they're breaking the law. And that gives the police a reason to act. That's the key. You want to give them a reason to act. And you're right. The advocacy groups, whatever it is, they'll be a big help. But the restraining order puts something on paper. And sometimes when the police say, well, we can't do nothing. Okay, well, now you can, because the person's within 50 feet of my home and I just saw them. So, I mean, that actually is something that you should look into, especially if you know that the person's coming out soon. We want you to be safe. So, if you can make that effort, I would, All right, guys, I guess that's it. All right, so we'll look at tomorrow night. Maybe I'll talk to Joe tomorrow night. And if not, we'll definitely do Friday with Denise again. So I'll give you guys a call. I love you guys. I'm expecting a call from 616 Love on her travels of thank yous all across the country, as she thanks every facility. And then after that, we'll work on your facility tours, 616, where you literally go to every facility and shake the hands of every staff member on all shifts. And if they are off or they're on some type of leave, we will go to their homes and visit them personally. This will be a commitment from you. If I do a live tomorrow, I will do it live. I'll probably sometime around 10 o'clock, guys. I'll have Joe on, see if I can get Russ on, see if I can get the panel on, and we'll just do random Q&As. Just ask us anything. Whatever you have, ask us anything, and we'll totally, of course you would, 616. Listen, if you do that, I'll promote the tour. All right, guys. Love you guys. It kind of made my day. All right, guys. Love you guys. I'll try to see if we can do something tomorrow, but definitely Friday. Friday night, 9:30, same time. I'll get Denise back on and we'll enjoy some more dialogue and keep the questions coming. You guys made the show better by asking the questions that you did. So love you guys. Stay safe.